It's January 2nd here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the arrest warrant for the South Korean leader. Investigators say they will execute the arrest warrant for President Yoon Suk Yeol by the deadline on January 6th. The troubled leader vowed to fight to the end in a message to his supporters, with opposition lawmakers saying such rhetoric is inciting his supporters and deepening the chaos. Burials of the victims who died in the deadly Jeju Air plane crash begin on Thursday. One of the plane's flight data reporters will be sent to the U.S. to understand what exactly caused the tragic incident. At least 15 people were killed and dozens injured in New Orleans after a 42-year-old man from Texas intentionally slammed his truck into a crowd early on New Year's Day. Authorities are investigating the attack as an act of terrorism after a black ISIS flag was found in the truck. The Corruption Investigation Office could execute the arrest warrant of President Yoon Suk Yeol as early as today. Now, clashes between the office and the presidential guards and Yoon's supporters seem likely during the arrest. Our Lee Si-hoo starts us off.
The Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials may execute a warrant to detain suspended President Yoon Suk Yeol as early as Thursday. That's 4 days since a court issued arrest and search warrants against the president over his botched attempt to impose martial law on December 3rd. It is the first arrest warrant for an incumbent president in South Korea's history. The CIO, which sought the warrant after Yoon defied summons for investigation 3 times, has since been discussing the specifics of the arrest with the police. The arrest warrant is valid until Monday, January 6th, and the head of the anti-corruption agency vowed that it would execute the warrant within its validity. But Yoon's legal team is arguing the warrant is unlawful and invalid. Yoon supporters are also protesting the warrant, holding rallies outside his residence in Yongsan-gu district in central Seoul. The Presidential Security Service, still on duty, says there would be security measures on its side according to due process, hinting that it could block the CIO from entering the residence and executing the warrant. The CIO warned there may be penalties for such attempts to block Yoon's arrest.
We see setting up barricades, locking up iron gates, and not complying with the execution of arrest as obstruction of public duty.
The CIO plans to arrest Yoon, investigate him at its headquarters in Gwacheon in Gyeonggi-do Province, and then detain him at Seoul Detention Center for up to 48 hours after arrest, as according to law. To keep Yoon in further detention, an additional warrant must be issued. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
In the meantime, senior presidential secretaries tendered their resignations en masse following acting President Choi Sang-mok's appointment of 2 justices to the Constitutional Court. Now, Choi has not accepted the resignations. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
Acting President Choi Sang-mok rejected the collective resignations by senior presidential secretaries on New Year's Day, emphasizing the need to restore stability to the nation following President Yoon Suk Yeol's imposition of martial law on December 3rd. The presidential office conveyed to the media on Wednesday that all senior secretaries, including Chief of Staff Chung Jin-seok, Policy Chief of Staff Sung Tae-yoon, and National Security Advisor Shin Won-sik, tendered their resignations to the acting president. As Yoon's presidential powers were suspended after the National Assembly voted to impeach him, his secretaries have been reporting to Choi instead, who himself was a senior economics affairs secretary to Yoon. The Finance Ministry issued a statement saying the acting president believes this is a time when all efforts must be focused on stabilizing livelihoods and ensuring the smooth administration of state affairs. He has no plans to accept the resignations. The mass resignations of Yoon's staff come a day after Choi decided to partially meet the opposition Democratic Party's demand to fill vacancies on the Constitutional Court. The move is expected to speed up the impeachment trial proceedings against President Yoon. As the impeachment case proceeds, political forces have been locking horns over the 3 empty seats on the Constitutional Court bench. With the 2/3 majority rule, the 6 justices currently on the panel would have to vote unanimously to impeach the embattled leader. While the ruling party has insisted an acting president does not have the authority to appoint constitutional court justices, the opposition has called for a full 9-member panel.
As of Tuesday, the court said it is still discussing the feasibility of issuing rulings with its current 6-member bench. It said that it urges the speedy filling of its 3 judicial vacancies, citing an unusually high number of urgent cases. It emphasized that the court needs to function properly in order for state governance to stabilize.
Under pressure from all sides, Che took a decisive step, appointing 2 judges recommended in a bill passed by the National Assembly last Thursday. But he deferred the appointment of Ma Eun-yeol, nominated by the main opposition, calling for a bipartisan agreement. A senior government official said acting President Che was aiming for a balanced composition on the Constitutional Court by appointing 1 nominee each from the ruling and opposition parties. However, the presidential office and the People Power Party expressed regret over Che's decision, as they maintain that judicial appointments should not be made by an interim leader. Che's move appears to have been made at appeasing the majority-holding opposition to restore stability to state affairs and the economy. The Democratic Party unilaterally impeached previous acting President Han Duck-soo for not approving new constitutional justices until the 2 parties had reached an agreement. Although 1 position remains vacant, the court now has 8 justices, the same number as it did when it ruled to impeach former President Park Geun-hye in 2017. 오수영, Arirang News.
And the Constitutional Court on Thursday is holding an inauguration ceremony for the 2 new justices on its panel, which will decide the fate of President Yoon's impeachment trial. The court installed judges Cho Han-chang and Chung Kye-sun for 6-year terms, ending on the last day of December 2030. Now, this leaves the court just 1 short of a full 9-member panel. The initial panel of 6 would have needed to vote unanimously for impeachment, as 6 out of 9 justices are needed to uphold impeachment. The latest appointments were approved by acting President Choi Sang-mok amid strong political clashes, as the move could speed up the pace of President Yoon's impeachment proceedings. So the anti-corruption agency now has 4 days left to execute a warrant to detain President Yoon Suk Yeol over his martial law order, with the execution not looking easy. Let's discuss more with Professor Lee Hyun this morning. Welcome back and Happy New Year, Professor Lee.
Hey, good morning. It's good to be with you.
So the investigation team pledged to carry out the arrest warrant by January 6th. Does that mean the arrest will happen sometime between now and next Monday, no matter what?
Well, you certainly would expect to, because the CIO chief has indicated that he will pursue the arrest. And despite, the potential issues, the legal issues that exist there, but also the potential for clashes with Yoon supporters, as well as the Presidential Security Service. So there's a window of time here, January 6th, where the arrest warrant will expire. And because he's publicly indicated they will go forward with the arrest, there will at least be an attempt to arrest the president in this case. And so I think you should fully expect there should be some situation at the presidential residence to seek the arrest of the president under this arrest warrant.
So it looks like attempts to arrest President Yoon will be inevitable. Now, how successful have attempts to arrest a politician been in the past?
Well, there were 2 very notable cases in the past, in 2000 and 2004, where 2 politicians in each separate situations were attempted to be arrested. And actually, in both cases, they were failed to be arrested by the prosecution for various reasons. One was because this person, in this case, the former Grand National Party member, Jung Hyung-gun, he entered the party office and then basically staged a sit-in protest. And his supporters, as well as other politicians, essentially blocked the police and the prosecution from arresting him. And in another case, in 2004, there was a former Democratic Party leader, Han Hwagap, who was sought to be arrested. But in this case, his party members basically blocked the entrance for the police to enter in to arrest him. So in both cases, because there was a clash between the police and the prosecution versus those who support these politicians, both situations ended up where there was no arrest. So I think this may be the situation that you see going forward with President Yoon, because these two previous cases show that the prosecution was unsuccessful in those situations.
Well, I do have to point out, this is the first time such a warrant has been approved for a sitting South Korean president, which is why it's so hard to predict what will actually happen next. And going back to what you just said, do you think the CIO will use force to arrest Yoon then?
Yeah, you would have to expect that there will be some sort of potential clash because it doesn't seem like, at least in terms of Yoon supporters, the citizens who support President Yoon, but also the X factor here will be the Presidential Security Service, who has not indicated whether or not they will comply with the prosecution with respect to the arrest warrant. So, there's a significant legal issue here because the president's lawyers have argued that, basically the Criminal Procedure Act does not give authority for the authorities to actually go and arrest the president, because there are potentially military secrets as well as classified documents which the prosecution and the police have no right to seize. And because they are entering the presidential office, or in this case, his residence, and the existence of these materials could be there, that goes beyond the scope of their search and seizure. And in this case, there's a big legal question here as to whether the judge that basically permitted the warrants to be executed, whether he exceeded his authority in this case. And so there's a legal question here. But in the event, in terms of a actual situation at the presidential residence, I think you should expect to probably see a clash between the parties.
Well, there are, presidential guards and also Yoon supporters outside the residence, which will make it even more hectic, maybe. But do you think CIO will seek maybe support from the police, the backup from the police?
I think you expect to, because they've already been communicating with each other about how they'll execute the warrant. But in the event that it happens over the next few days, of course, January 6th being the deadline, I think the scene there will be extremely chaotic because it's hard to predict, obviously, in terms of the people who are there, the citizens, again, who are in support of President Yoon. But again, the security service has refused in the past to accept the warrants, and whether or not there's been any agreement that was forged between the security service as well as the prosecution, that remains to be seen. So unless there's any agreement between the two sides as to how they'll conduct the search and ultimately go forward and seize the president, I don't think you should expect to be a calm situation. I think you're going to see a clash, and it'll be very interesting to see the timing of it, whether it happens during the daytime, whether it happens in the evening when no one's around. So I think this is the part of the strategy probably on the prosecution as to the timing of the actual execution of the warrant.
Well, the chief of the CIO sounded pretty determined to make the arrest happen. Let's say Yoon ends up being arrested. Where will he be taken to, and what lies ahead for President Yoon?
Well, he'll be immediately taken to the basic CIO office in Gwacheon, and he'll be subject to questioning. So in this instance, there's been a number of questions, of course, and the public is already aware that the CIO has a large number of questions to ask the president in terms of testimony, getting his testimony as to what happened during the declaration of martial law, and whether or not, in this case, whether he abused his authority. But after that questioning, then he'll be sent to detention. And there's 48 hours between the time he's arrested and the extent to which he can be detained. And he'll be sent to Uiwang, basically, where there's a detention center, and he'll likely be placed in solitary confinement, given his status as the president, not to be, mingled with other, let's say, detainees. But then if there's a desire to continue to detain him, then another arrest warrant needs to be issued. And in that case, up to 20 days he can be held. And then there's an issue about whether the prosecution, not the CIO, can also question him, because there's an agreement in advance to question the president on various grounds. So I think what lies ahead is detention, and then the question is whether or not an additional arrest warrant can be sought against him to sustain his detention for 20 days.
Professor Lee, thank you so much for joining us again this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Two of the 179 victims of the Jeju Air crash will be laid to rest on Thursday, as bodies are slowly being returned to the bereaved families. One Thai national and a Korean victim of the crash will be laid to rest in the southwestern city of Gwangju today. So far, around 20 bodies have been returned to their families. While all 179 victims have been identified, authorities are still conducting DNA testing to match body parts. Meanwhile, the flight data recorder from the ill-fated passenger plane will be sent to the U.S. for analysis due to damage that makes it difficult to analyze here in South Korea. Acting President and Deputy Prime Minister Choi Sang-mo called on law enforcement authorities to monitor any malicious acts against the victims and families of the Jeju airline crash. This came on Thursday during the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters meeting. Choi pointed to false comments, fake news, and provocative footage on social networks with malicious intentions, and said that any defamation will be met with legal repercussions. He also said the conversion of recorded data from the flight into audio format will be finished by Friday. And the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board will start the investigation process alongside South Korean officials. In the U.S., at least 15 people were killed and many more injured when a man drove his truck through the busy Bourbon Street in the city of New Orleans before he was shot by police. Lee Seung-ja has more.
Bourbon Street, located at the heart of the French Quarters in New Orleans, was particularly crowded due to New Year's celebrations and college football's Sugar Bowl between the University of Notre Dame and the University of Georgia, set to take place later Wednesday evening. However, the scene quickly turned into chaos when a driver drove a truck up the street, crashing into pedestrians, killing at least 15 people and leaving dozens more injured. The suspect, who was shot by police officers, was found to have an ISIS flag in the vehicle at the time of the attack. Calling it an act of terrorism, the FBI says it's investigating potential links with terrorist organizations. The FBI also said the driver may not have been solely responsible for the attack, as improvised explosive devices were found in the vehicle as well. IEDs were also discovered on Bourbon Street, with video footage showing 3 men and a woman who may have been involved in placing the devices. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump took to his social media platform Truth Social on Wednesday to blame illegal immigrants for the attack before the suspect was identified by authorities as 42-year-old Shamsud Din-Jabbar, an Army veteran and U.S. citizen from Texas. The annual football game was postponed for safety reasons. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
It's now officially 2025. The new year comes with a new set of measures that should make people's livelihoods better and more fruitful. Our Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
It's the new year, which means new policies. And the ones going to effect in 2025 aim to further improve people's daily lives. To tackle the nation's demographic challenges, the government is implementing several new childcare policies. Starting January 1st, the maximum monthly pay for childcare leave will go up from 1.5 million won, or around $1,020 to 2.5 million won. This means that for the first 3 months of leave, parents will receive 100% of their salary, capped at a maximum of around 2.5 million won, 2 million won from the 4th to the 6th month, and then 1.6 million after the 6th month, which amounts to 23.1 million, or nearly $16,000 per year at the current exchange rate. The government is also expanding childcare leave to go into effect starting February 23rd from the current 1 year to a maximum of a year and a half.
We asked people what they needed the most, and the most common answers that we received were increased childcare leave pay and extended leave periods, which is why we have expanded these policies.
And to decrease the burden felt by companies that need to hire replacement workers, the government is also increasing the subsidy cap to 1.2 million won from the current 800,000 won per month. South Korea is also entering the era of the 10,000 won minimum hourly wage starting January 1st, with it being set at 10,030 Korean won, or $6,081. This is an increase of 1.7% from 2024's minimum hourly wage of 9,861. For someone who works 40 hours a week, this brings the monthly minimum pay to around 2.09 million won.
So to that regard, the minimum wage is the minimum level to support the consumers' purchasing power. That is clearly beneficial to the industry and the manufacturing firms and the economy. As long as minimum wage is increased, it is much better for the economy.
And on the industrial front, businesses are on the receiving end of support measures in the new year. During the first half of the year, the government will cover 70% of the rental costs for serving robots and kiosks, for all those models provided to be ones designed to accommodate the elderly and the disabled. 이수진, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Yoon Se-young, and this is The World Now. Pope Francis has once again called for people to reject abortion. The message was delivered during the Solemnity of Mary, Mother of God Mass at St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City on New Year's Day. The Pope appealed for a firm commitment to protecting and respecting life from conception to natural death. The pontiff also highlighted the need to safeguard the lives of unborn and young children and those dying in isolation, emphasizing the importance of protecting all precious lives. He firmly stressed that human dignity must always be respected, adding a message of hope and encouragement for everyone to cherish their lives and look to the future with optimism. While Pope Francis is widely regarded as one of the most progressive and reformist pontiffs in history, he continues to hold a conservative stance on the issue of abortion. The supply of Russian natural gas to Europe via pipelines crossing Ukrainian territory was halted on New Year's Day. Ukraine's Energy Minister Herman Halushenko announced the decision, saying that the move would result in financial losses for Russia and a loss of market access. This came as Ukraine chose not to renew a 5-year agreement with Russia's state-owned energy company Gazprom for the use of the Urengoi pipeline. The decision directly impacts gas supplies to several European states, including the Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovakia, and Moldova. Notably, Hungary and Slovakia, which have pro-Russian leanings, expressed strong opposition to the move. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico warned on social media that this gas cutoff would have dramatic consequences, not just for the Russian Federation, but for all EU nations. Now to Montenegro, where 10 people, including 2 children, were shot dead on New Year's Day in a village near Cetinje in the southwest of the country. According to reports, the 45-year-old suspect, who is still at large, retrieved a firearm from his home following a dispute at a bar. The gunman then killed members of his own family, the bar owner, and the bar owner's family at a separate location. Following the attack, the suspect fled the scene armed, prompting police to deploy special forces to track him down. Authorities revealed that the suspect had a history of being detained for illegal possession of firearms. In Germany and Italy, people celebrated the arrival of 2025 with unique traditions like frigid water swimming and dives. In Berlin, brave swimmers marked the new year with their annual ice bath tradition. Members of the Berlin Seals Club swam and danced in the icy waters, while the morning water temperature was 6 degrees Celsius and the air temperature was 4 degrees. Meanwhile, in the Italian capital Rome, 3 men dove off the 80-meter-high Cavour Bridge into the Tiber River, a tradition dating back to 1946. The Netherlands also has a similar tradition of diving into the icy North Sea to welcome the new year. However, this year's event was cancelled due to strong winds.
Temperatures will be lower than yesterday, but hovering above the norms. The morning temperatures will plunge back down to season norms tomorrow morning and on Saturday. Meanwhile, parts of Gyeonggi-do province and the East Coast are under a dry weather advisory. As winds kick up over parts of the East Coast, the risk of wildfires will increase into the start of the new year. The afternoon highs will be similar to slightly lower than yesterday, topping out at 6 degrees here in the capital. Daegu make it to 10 degrees. Busan, Jeju topping out at 12 degrees. Sunny skies are expected for most parts of Korea. The West Coast and Jeju will see a mix of rain and snow on Friday. A winter mix early next week will bring a big chill to the country in the middle of next week. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up our morning edition of Arirang News. We will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.